So why is this such an important topic? Well, the entire economy is about $17 trillion here in the United States. Information and communications is about $690 billion. So it's about 4.5% of the economy, depending on how you think about these issues. Some have said upwards of closer to 10% of the economy is dependent on this. It is a big driver of social welfare. It is a key to our global, or any country's global economic competitiveness. It is an area where things change all the time, and national leadership or a company's leadership is just as fragile as market share in the handset market, right? We've all seen the rise and fall of Motorola, the rise of Apple products. We see how quickly these things change, the Android operating system. Things change very fast in this part of the economy, and it makes it particularly critical that the institutions that guide the policy making are at least try to approximate that pace of change, or at least not get in the way. And I think it's one of the big challenges that you'll see on a recurring basis during the course is institutional structures and processes that are sort of straining to keep up with the pace of technological change. This also means it's a pretty good place to spend your career, because it is a growing part of the economy. It is a dynamic part of the economy, and therefore new leaders and new business people and new engineers are welcomed additions where great opportunity lies in a somewhat challenging economic environment. The goal of the class is to bring together the legal, the economic, and the engineering, technical components of spectrum management in one piece. And that does, we're to try to do our best between the three of us to drive home those cross themes, but every problem we look at, you want to bring those three different lenses to the approach if you can. And also, although the course is about spectrum, spectrum touches virtually every policy issue there is in Washington or even around the world, whether it's healthcare reform or energy or education. And so there's fun opportunities for you in your paper and in this class to think about ways in which spectrum policy and spectrum-related issues can influence those other debates. So keep those ideas in mind as we start to go through the course, because I do think whatever your area of interest is, if you came into the class thinking, oh, this would be a little bit interesting, but I'm really about healthcare, there's some interesting crossover. I think M-bands is one of the paper topics in a medical device policy issue that came up at the FCC called M-bands. There's lots of different ways that we can sort of tie together a multidisciplinary interest in the class, and we want to do that. It'll make it more interesting and energizing for everyone. So the reason this class is important and interesting is in part the prominence of it across the world. And it just struck me yesterday, after I got done with class, I had occasion to look through the New York Times, and I don't think we had a chance. Did we post, right? Oh, you did post it, good. And on the front page of the New York Times is as TV ratings fall, TV ratings and profits fall, networks face a cliffhanger. Really interesting story about the future of network television, and very, sort of essential to some of the premises underlying the incentive auctions that we're going to talk about in class. So that's on page 1. And then if you flip through on A4, an online journalist in China, investigation of top official yields response. A6, cyber attacks on the rise against U.S. corporations. A6 also has a South Korean journalist, online journalist. We also have, let's see, there's another one back here. I guess one more. I thought I started them all, but maybe I didn't. And then there's a pilotless plane on, there's a drone discussion, which of course implicates spectrum policy, which a lot of our DoD friends, that's one of the technologies that are enabled.
Which page?
It's on the last page of the New York Times, A19 from yesterday. We're going to talk a lot about how DoD uses spectrum, and one of the issues is that as warfighting becomes more automated and less human-controlled, that spectrum-based technologies take an even larger role. So that was another part of it. And then Business Day in general, I recommend folks, especially the New York Times does a great job on the technology stuff, but if you look on the front page, there's 6 stories on the front business section. 5 of the 6 have implications for telecom and tech, and some for wireless as well. So ABC announced it's going to let viewers live stream their programming over mobile devices, a big change. And so that's important both for incentive auctions and for the amount of spectrum that commercial wireless providers are going to need, because that's a bit of a game changer. The decline of network television has a sophomore slump story here. There's a privacy story on Bloomberg snooping on its terminals. The Taiwan story is about the role of handsets and technology to Taiwan. And then upper left-hand corner is a story about the New Orleans paper that has moved away from daily publication and lost its role in the community, in part because of online sources. We're going to talk a little bit later on about media ownership issues. There are limits on the amount of media that any one company can control in a market, but it's all based on whether or not you have broadcasting. It doesn't matter if you have control cable or satellite or other platforms or online platforms. It's only about whether you control broadcasting or if you control radio or TV or newspapers. So it's a very interesting element of the debate, and one of the issues is that many have argued that you should allow TV and radio to buy newspapers because newspapers are in such peril that anybody who wants to buy them and get the synergies, we should allow that to happen because daily newspapers are under such siege. So anyway, I was just really struck by the number of stories in the paper yesterday that sort of demonstrated the issues that we talked about, and I just wanted to flag them for you. And almost any of them could turn into a paper topic. So you don't really have to look much farther than yesterday's New York Times to have 5 or 6 potential paper topics that could work. So any questions about any of that?